it's now. All right. So back to this complex definition. So this is, I took this, I don't think I have it. Oh yeah, modified from Hill down there. Carol Hill did a lot of work on the Capitana Reef in the Delaware Basin. She was an awesome geologist and also mapped a lot of the caves in Carlsbad Caverns National Park. But here you have the reef zone, which you have Capitan limestone, goat seep. These are the names that you find over by the Guadalupe Mountains. And then the Tanzil, Yates, Seven Rivers, Queens, and so forth kind of grade into that. So where this really stops and begins isn't really, it's not defined because it's weakly defined. They're really connected. The back reef and the reef sometimes could be thought of as one aquifer unit. And then as you go over here down to the Glass Mountains, you still have Capitan limestone, but you have different formation names, but very similar to this. The ones over in the Guadalupe Mountains were the ones that were first identified, the stratigraphic section, and those were used traditionally by oil and gas, no matter where they were in the Delaware Basin. So that's one of the confusions with trying to understand where you are and what comprises the Capitan Reef complex is having all these different names. All right. The Edwards Trinity Plateau. Oh, wait a minute. Forgot to mention one thing about this. The highest yields, as you know, are in the limestone, but you can have just as high yields in the back reef sediments or the rocks where they're fractured. And so matter of fact, sometimes it's even better depending on where you are. So it's an interesting system. The Edwards Trinity Plateau, this is another map from the Texas Water Development Board. And I like it because it breaks it out in these regions. Here we are. This is the Pecos River here, I believe. Yeah. And so really we're just going to look at this part. I'm not going to bother with what's called the Western Edwards Plateau and the Southwestern Edwards Plateau. One thing that's not shown here is that in Brewster County, a lot of these rocks continue on in the southern part of the county and even go into Marfa, the Marfa Basin and Presidio County, and underneath the igneous aquifer. It's way more extensive than what's showing there, but we'll do with what we can. Here again, the stratigraphy is full of names. So we have the two areas that we're interested in are the Western Edwards Plateau and Southwestern Edwards Plateau. And you see this, there's all these, there's a time period, it's all Cretaceous. You have upper and lower, and then all these other different stages. And then these different formation names that translate across. One not shown here is when you look at the really old maps is the Devil's River Formation, which is equivalent to the St. Helena and where's St. Helena? There in this part of the what's called it says upper or lower. This is probably the Edwards and the Trinity is down here. So the Edwards is more carbonate and the Trinity has more plastic material and sands. And what I found is most of the production is better here where this is not, hasn't been enhanced by karst type features. The other thing is in this Edwards part, as you get further west and maybe even northwest, you'll have more marls and things. Not a very good aquifer. Matter of fact, it's probably more of an aquiclude or whatever you want to call it than anything else. So it doesn't, it's a extremely complex system, and it depends on where you are, plays a role in where the water is and the composition of those rocks. Okay, so this is a food for thought recess here. So when you were looking at springs, which we have several springs that are going to be talked about in this today, and a lot of them are artesian, just like the one San Solomon Spring in Balmorhea. We have, a constant flow of water. So what's the driving force of that? Is that recharge that's constantly added or infrequently added to a groundwater system? Or is it the draining of groundwater storage over a long period of time? So if you have a very large reservoir and it's just going to, let's say that reservoir only significantly recharged in the Pleistocene time, then if it's the draining effect could be the primary driving force for the spring flows. And as those heads decrease, the spring flows will decrease with it. Same effect as what has groundwater pumping has on removal of storage from the aquifer. Okay, so I call this not designated aquifer examples. Some of this is stuff I've worked on more recently. And so we'll do the Castile Rustler, Northern Culberson, Santa Elena limestone, and Southern Brewster County, and the Mina Grande Formation, which is at Shafter in South Presidio County. This was a real fun project, did it earlier last year. And basically, we were trying to characterize springs in a watershed, the Delaware River watershed. That comes off from the Guadalupe Mountains and goes towards the Pecos River. And so here's a map of that watershed. And you can see there's the Guadalupe Mountains and National Park here. And there's all the springs that have been identified. And then the Pecos River is somewhere right here. The geology here, this is the Bell Canyon Formation, which is not a very good water producer, but it's got a lot of bedding plains, and in those bedding plains, recharge occurs, and then springs will pop out. So most of the springs in this light blue section are all localized and driven by recharged bedding plains between shales and limestones and sandstones. And then coming out here, this is the Castile Formation, which is mainly gypsum. And you can see the lighter colored stuff or pockets of alluvium. So the Rustler kind of reports out here somewhere. It's not, I think it's the same color as that, or maybe it's slightly different. But anyway, I call this the Castile Rustler system. This is a cross-section that I took from USGS report, and here coming off the Delaware Mountains going from west to east, there's the Delaware Mountain Group, and then you have the Castile and the Rustler on top of it. And then in the Rustler and the Castile, I should have probably brought that over here, there's karst features filled with alluvium and infiltrated with stormwater. When the oil and gas, I guess it's still going, they were targeting these things for rig supply, but that was also kind of taking water away from spring flows. So how do you find these things? Well, there was a great study done by, what was her name? It'll come to me later. Anyway, she's at the, I think it's the Karst Institute or wherever it is in Carlsbad. I'm drawing a blank. But anyway, they did a karst density map. So we overlaid that with the springs and looked at this. And so you can see like this big giant karst density area is what feeds Willow Spring. And we were able to line these up and then kind of develop a conceptual model of what supports the spring flows in this watershed. All karst related. Pretty interesting stuff. All right. Santa Elena. This is in southern Brewster County. Amy, how am I doing on time and how much do I have?
You're at 9:30. You have until 10.
Okay, great. I think I'll pull it off here. Okay, so here's a map. This is Brewster County. And we've got a lot of stuff going on here. Igneous aquifer in red. You have the Capitan. And then we have over here is the Edwards Trinity Plateau, Marathon aquifer. And then down here, you look at most of the southern part of Brewster County has no designated aquifer. And so what's going on here? What are all these contours? Well, the main producing aquifer down here for Steady Butte, Terlingua, Lajitas is called the St. Helena limestone. And that limestone actually produces pretty good yield in places. It's found throughout this area. It's really part of the Edwards Trinity system. But if you look how crazy these contours are, it's not all connected. These are contours at the top of the formation. So this is the Solitario, which is a big uplifted feature. Then you got a big fault zone here with offsets of almost 2,000 feet. Another one here, 1,500 feet. And so basically what we have are a good producing limestone unit and where it's saturated, but also it's compartmentalized. So here's my first rendition of compartments, and I call them different names. So if you're familiar with the Edwards Trinity, in the Trinity section, the lower section of the Edwards Trinity is the Glen Rhodes Formation. And above it would be the St. Helena limestone. The St. Helena limestone over here is high and dry. It's above the water table, but this is all in the Glen Rhodes. This system is what's also feeding spring flows along the Rio Grande. Moving to the southwest in the park region and also up by Terlingua Ranch. I call this the Terlingua Ranch section, which may be more than one compartment itself, but it's a little more hit and miss there where you find St. Helena because of the structural complexities. And then down here is the Solitario. The Solitario is here. And so groundwater is flowing, recharging around that and flowing to the southeast. And so that's the system that the supply wells for Steady Butte, Lajitas, Terlingua tap into. There are some important things to consider here for people drilling wells down in these areas. It's because there are saturated Cretaceous units overlying the St. Helena. And one of them is, I forgot. It's going to be the upper stuff in what's called the Edwards portion. It'll come to me later what the name is. There's probably 4 names for it anyway. But anyway, it has poorer quality water in a lot of places. And it will also drain off into the lower St. Helena if you drill through it and not realize you've gone through some brackish water into a freshwater zone. Okay. This might be my last one. So this project did for Presidio County last year, and it's at Shafter. You know where Shafter is? Shafter's sparsely populated, but in dire need of water. And it's geologically complex. So there were several wells, exempt wells, domestic, where you want to call them, that were drilled for some landowners here. And they went into the upper Cretaceous, and it was just marl and a bunch of junk, and there was nothing there. Really, it spit out like a quarter of a gallon a minute. And, but if they only gone twice as deep, they would have hit the pay zone. So, but there's complications with that. I'll show you. You would think with this many drill holes done by mining around Shafter is here, and this is all the drill holes that have been done for the mine at Shafter, that you should have a really good idea of the geology. You just go, man, that's going to really dial it in for me. But it's not available. So you can't have it unless it's all proprietary data. So we had to kind of go with what we could find. So the general geology here at Shafter. Let's see, Shafter is here again. No, Shafter's down here, sorry. The igneous offer pretty much surrounds Shafter. And over here, you get wells in the igneous offer, and up here that produce good water, but they're too far away, and the land ownership issues, it's not available. So what do we do for residents of Shafter? We have to find something locally within this area. This red zone here is the ore body. It's a silver deposit that is part of the mine that at Shafter, and it goes down dip like this, and it's in a karst horizon of Pennsylvania rock. I'll show you. So you have off to the west here, northwest, you have the Mina Grande Fault, which is igneous rocks, and then Permian Cretaceous rocks up against it. This Cretaceous section is zero production capability, but this Mina Grande formation has a nice karst horizon on it, and that's also what they have to dewater to get to the ore. So it's a complicated thing, but if you go far enough down dip, you can create a reliable supply. It's actually good quality water, even though it's sitting in an ore body. It's great quality water, and there's a potential there for both things to coexist, we hope. So if you ever read books about geology, Rick Bass has some really good ones. And one of the first ones he did called Oil Notes. And I always like this quote. It's what I think of when I'm doing some kind of geologic thought process. So that's it. Are there any questions?
Let me get you on that, Steve.
I can't hear you, Kevin. What about water quality? And I think it was related to this, right? So it just dawned on me, the Boquillas. has really poor water quality in the Terlingua area. Has some good quality. So the interesting thing is Boquillas is in the upper part of the Cretaceous stratigraphy and is exposed at Terlingua Ranch and also at the surface and also near surface around this area. But the Boquillas limestone or formation, or whatever it's called, only has good quality water, where the igneous intrusions have popped up and it's recharged locally around those igneous intrusions. Once you get away from that, the Boquillas has really horrible water quality, a lot of sulfur. Matter of fact, there was a well drilled around Terlingua that had some oil in it. So that's where water quality varies a lot. In the St. Helena, it's I remember, maybe Cindy can refresh my memory, but I think it's around 1,000 TDS. There's not much variability. It ranges from like 1,000 to 1,500 total dissolved solids content, and it seems to be pretty uniform in character from what little data we have. There's not a whole lot of data. Allison? Hi.
Let's go back to the back of the map. The cross section, it showed the outcrop of that Vina Grande and other towns that you've done.
You mean this?
Yes.
Yeah, that's been previously mapped by the USGS. It's right there. It's also pops up here. I think those are the only two places where it's exposed. Is that
Back to the content read now. Of course, and we were talking about but somewhere in here you said that the reed rock itself has this pretty good aquifer, that in places the back reef is better if it's fractured.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any work done, or do you know any work about like how well constructed that fracturing is in back reef rock and where?
so in the Apache Mountains? Most of the Capitan Reef is above the water table. And then where the high yielding wells are, so the Capitan Reef is right along this. Actually, this is not a very good rendition of what the outline of the aquifer system is. But the back reef units, more or less here, are the ones that yield the most water. And that's there's a lot of, as you know, a lot of structure faulting and stuff going on. I would say throughout this whole region, Brewster, from here all the way down, major structures really create the permeability in the carbonate rocks. Is that?
Sure. Yeah, in the ABS too. But I know that's
Yeah, correct.
We have. That question.
First features of Castile, what kind of water quality do you see in springs?
Oh, that's interesting. Water quality in the Castile is not as bad as you would think, because has anybody ever been to the gypsum caves that are right east of Carlsbad Caverns? They're pretty extensive and big. And so You get flow through that, and the residence time isn't long enough for the water quality to turn into basically dissolved gypsum. So it's much better than you would think, you know, like 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams per liter TDS is what we were seeing. Like at Willow Spring is probably the best example.
You see a lot bigger.
Pardon me?
Yes, be a lot of variability in different ones, different systems.
Oh, in that Castile, you know, we don't have enough data to really assess the variability. We did measure a few of the springs, but you know, land ownership or access makes it slightly difficult to get to some of the places. So I couldn't say it was very extensive. We saw some variability, but the ones we went to were the higher flow systems, and so those were usually lower in TDS.
I was told that the online books could ask questions if they would unmute themselves, we will be able to hear that. If you have any questions online, we'll give you a second here. Yeah. Oh, goodness, that one.
Steve, I don't know. Whatever low, it's my recommended students, 15. The map, they like, or not from this, not. Front day, west of the Chaffwood. So basically, that implies that the map of the reef that just left.
Was it in the Mina Grande formation? But west. So, that's right. I think. Yeah, you're talking about over here, aren't you? Yeah. I did not concentrate on west of the Mina Grande fault for various reasons, but the main thing that we looked at on the west side of this fault was is it called is it the Perdiz conglomerate, or that's a pretty good unit over here with water bearing unit in that area, but we didn't look down here. There's really not much data as far as wells go. Well, there's zero.
A very big fan.